So today we are going to continue our study of negative numbers of integers, and we're going to talk about opposites and absolute value. If you need to look something up in your book, this will be chapter 5, lesson 2. Now, I'm going to start off by saying opposites and absolute value are so easy and so obvious that you're going to second guess yourself. You're going to say it can't possibly be that obvious of an answer. It is. It's okay. Don't second guess yourself. All right, let's talk about what these two things are. First of all, we're going to talk about absolute value, which is this big fancy term, and we spend so much time on it, and all it means is how far a number is from zero. A lot of times you'll see me abbreviate it ABSVAL, just because absolute value is a lot to have to write out. ABSVAL is way easier, okay? All this is a measurement from zero. How many jumps on a number line a number is from zero. It really is that simple. Now, the thing I need to tell you is that your answer will always be positive. I will squeeze that note in a minute. And here's why. Let's say that we want to take the absolute value of -3. Now, these bars, they're called the absolute value bars. I make them stretch a little bit above and a little bit below the blue lines of my notebook paper, just so that they're not confused with ones. Okay, they go straight up and down. They are not curved like a parentheses. They are actually a straight bar. Now, these two bars are telling me how far is this number from zero? Well, I'll go to my number line and I'll say, well, here's 0. 1, 2, 3 jumps. The absolute value is 3. Not -3, just 3, positive 3. We'll come back to 0 in a second. How far is 2? What is the absolute value of positive 2? Well, here's 0. Let's see how far away it is, the distance. 1, 2. Again, I'm not using a sign. Now, trick question. How far is 0 from 0? 0. When you look at negative signs, negative usually tells you a direction. In this case, it would be left. If I was looking at a vertical number line, it would be down. Negative tells me a direction. The number tells me the distance. And since I'm measuring distance, I don't care which direction it goes. Okay, so a note to yourself that the answer is always positive. Okay, it's not that we're switching the sign. That's not it. Whatever's inside, you write outside and forget about a sign. Okay, that's what I said. It's that easy. Like you're literally counting how far something is from 0. And when you've got bigger numbers, like 45, well, you know that's 45 spaces from 0. You don't even have to count it. Okay, let's talk about opposites. Now, before we talk about the math definition of opposites, let's think about some opposites in our everyday life. If you stand up right now and you face the opposite direction, what are you going to do? You're going to turn around, right? Well, what happens when you've turned around and I say, okay, now do the opposite again? You turn around, you're back facing the way that you started. Keep that in mind. If I go forward 2 steps and I do the opposite, what do? I go backward 2 steps. Okay. What happens if I take $10 out of my bank account? What's the opposite of that? Putting $10 in my bank account. Okay. So we have these opposites that we talk about in our everyday life. They're kind of related to what we do in math. The official definition of an opposite is numbers that are the same distance from 0. Now, you're going to have another way to look at these in just a second. I have a very fancy number line for you here. On one side, I went to positive 12, and the other side, I went to negative 11. I couldn't fit another one in there. Sorry. But that's okay, because my arrows say that they go on forever. Notice 0 in the middle, counting 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. -1, -2, -3, etc. Going away from 0. That will be very helpful for us in a minute. So let's say that we've got the number -7. On my number line, I'm going to make a dot. A blob of wet paint has just fallen onto my number line. I don't know why you would ever do this, but hang with me for the example. A blob of wet paint has fallen on my lumber line. And I'm going to fold this in half at 0, right? If I fold this in half at 0 and I press the paper down, where will that wet paint blob end up over here? It's going to end up at +7. Because let's think about it. From 0, we had to go 7 spaces between my paint blob and 0. Well, if I'm folding it there, that paint blob is going to be the same distance on the other side. And 7 happens to be 7 jumps away on the other side. All right. So the opposite, don't put an equal sign between these, but the opposite for this is +7. -7 and +7 are both the same distance from 0. They're opposites. Let's look at 2. If I was to put a blob of green paint at +2, I don't think that looks green for you, but you get my point. If I folded this at 0, where will my wet paint blob hit on the other side? Well, this was 2 jumps away, so we'll go 2 jumps. It would hit right here at -2. So the opposite of 2 is -2. They're both the same distance from 0. All right, without me drawing wet paint blobs, what do you think the opposite of -4 would be? +4. If this is 4 jumps away on the left, this is going to be the same distance away on the right. We'll talk about 0 in a minute. What do you notice about these 3 examples? The official definition of opposites are numbers that are the same distance from 0. But when you look at -7 and 7, and 2 and -2, and -4 and 4, what do you notice? They're the same number with different signs. So that's another way to find the opposite. Same number, different sign. Okay, so without a number line, if you had very large numbers, you can do this real quickly. What's the opposite of -45? 45. What's the opposite of 287? -287. Okay. What's the opposite of 0? Maybe a trick question there. Well, we said yesterday that 0 doesn't have a sign. And there isn't another 0. So this one's special. It's its own opposite. Or you can say it doesn't have one. Both answers are correct. Because if I give 0, I can't give -0. Oh my goodness, don't give -0. Doesn't exist. Can't give it. Okay, so 0 is either its own opposite or it doesn't have an opposite. I have one more challenge question for you. Let's say that I have the number -17. What's the opposite of the opposite? Remember my example when I said stand up and turn around and then turn around again? You went back to where you started. That's exactly what happens here. What's the opposite of -17? +17. What's the opposite of that? Back to where we started. Okay, this seems silly, but when we start talking about subtraction next year in 7th grade, that's really what's going on. You're taking the opposite of opposites. Don't psych yourself out. It really is as obvious an answer as you think it might be for these.